Now, you really want me to show you some moves, don't you? I know what you want. I know what you want. You want me to show you what moves to make. Well, let me talk about puzzles, chess puzzles. Chess puzzles are great. Chess puzzles is how I learn tactics. That's right. Most of the puzzles I'm going to show you have to do with the middle game, where you're trying to win material, and the end game, where you're going for checkmate. To me, those are two very important things. One actually leads to the other. When you can dominate with material, that's going to lead to a victory. If you can see checkmate in one move, two moves, that's going to lead to a victory. And that's what it's about. You do want to win your games of chess, and I'm going to show you how. Okay? I'm going to show you how to break down a puzzle. There is a way to answer all puzzles. And then how do you translate that into your game? Well, guess what? Every time a piece moves on the chessboard, we've created a new puzzle. That's right, the elements change. Every time a piece moves, there are new pieces that are under attack, old pieces that are no longer under attack, and there's always check. Keeping up with check becomes super important the whole way through a chess game. I didn't say take every check. I said keep up with them. Please notice them. I see way too many games where people are just moving, taking pieces, thinking that's all they're supposed to do, not occurring to them that, guess what? You have checkmate in one move. You can end the game right now. The game can be over right now. But you're not looking for check. So guess what? You won't find checkmate. If you're not looking for check, which is half a checkmate, you won't find checkmate. It's that simple. If you're looking to take pieces, take pieces, take pieces, take pieces, you don't win the game strictly by taking pieces. Taking pieces is supposed to lead to a material advantage. Once you recognize your material advantage, that's your way, your road to checkmate. Okay? So, I'm going to set up some puzzles. I'm going to start with some easy one-move puzzles. In the one-move puzzles, it's really about recognition. I'm going to be talking about recognition. I'm going to be showing you how to use the threes of chess to analyze where you are in the game. Mostly middle game, sometimes end game. Okay? Show you how to use tempo to be in control. That's right, tempo is how you're going to really control a lot of the puzzles in chess. We'll talk about tempo later. I'm going to have to do a whole video just on tempo so you can understand exactly what tempo is and how it affects a chess game. During the puzzles themselves, I will explain how tempo is affecting the game, and hopefully you will get it from that. So let's start out with some, let me explain. All puzzles are solved in the same manner. When it's your turn, the first thing you should look for is checkmate. That's right, checkmate in one move. So to find checkmate in one move, part 1 and part 2 are combined. You must search out all the checks. Look where the checks are, and if you check the king, show the best way to get out of the check. A lot of times there's only one way to get out of the check. Sometimes there's multiple ways to get out of the check, but only one way that makes sense. And you always want to make the best move for your opponent. Don't assume they're going to make bad moves. If you're playing a good chess player, they're not going to make all bad moves. They may make some bad moves because it's hard to see every good move in chess. So, step number 1, mate in 1. Look for check. Examine all the checks. If there's a check that the king cannot, or the opposite side cannot capture to get out of the check, they cannot block, there's no piece that can block the attack, and the king cannot move out of the check. That's the 3s of chess again. Capture, block, move. That's where they come in. 3s of chess. There's only 3 ways to get out of check. Capture, block, run away. Running away is always last. Don't make it first. If you make running away your first thing you do when you're in check, you're just going to get checkmated a lot. I mean a lot. Okay, so make sure when you can capture that you capture. And if you can block, it's usually better to block than to move. But take the best choice. If moving is the best choice, then that's what you should do. Okay? Make sure you look at your options. So, look for mate in 1. And then, if there is no mate in 1, well, you still have to examine what the checks do. And what we're looking for is pattern recognition. Yeah, I'm going to be going through pattern recognition, the 3s of chess, tactics, and tempo. Boy, sounds like a lot. I sure put a lot on your plate right then. Sounded like more than 3 things to me. But all these things are important elements in figuring out your next move. Because that's why you're here. You got to that point in the game, you're like, what do I do now? I got the game started. I got some knights. I got my bishops out. I even have my king castle. I guess I'm ready for some middle game stuff. So where should I start? Going to the center of the board is never a bad thing to do. And notice where your opponent's king is. That's the side of the board where most of the attack is going to occur. Unless the other side of the board is weak and you have options there as well. Alright, so we're going to look at some puzzles. I'm going to look at 1 move puzzles first. The 1 move puzzles will show the position, the pattern, let's say, that you need to recognize in order to get checkmate. So I'm going to we're going to do some easy checkmate puzzles first, and then we're going to do some more difficult ones where you have to look at more elements, where you have to combine other tactics. That's right, combining tactics is a powerful way to beat your opponent. That's right, you could put a fork with a pin. That's right. There's lots of tactics that can be combined in chess. While one tactic is going on, you throw another tactic in there to help it. Your opponent's going to fall if you have tactics going here, tactics going there, tactics in the... There's no way for your opponent to stop every tactic. Alright, so let's do some puzzle solving. I'm going to set up some puzzles. I'm going to play mostly from the white side. And don't be discouraged about playing black. I'm going to have to do some puzzles where black is in control. I think we use the white side because in chess white moves first. White moves first. So I think we do puzzles from the white side simply because white moves first in a chess game, and that's the way people think. But I don't want you to think that these puzzles are only from the white side of the board. Every single puzzle can occur either on the white or the black. There are no tactics that occur only on one side. All the tactics are applicable to both sides of the chessboard. You just have to find them through pattern recognition. I'm going to help you with that. Come back to the Coach's Corner. Look up some of my puzzle videos. Puzzle videos with recognition. Puzzle videos with 1 move. Puzzle videos with 2 moves. And yes, puzzle videos with 3 moves. That's right, you got to think 3 moves ahead in chess, not just one. Yeah, if somebody makes a bad move and puts themselves in a bad position, you could take advantage of it. But why would I wait for my opponent to put himself in a bad position for me to make a good move? If I can control my opponent, I'll make him get in a bad position. Yeah, I'll force his man into the bad position that I can put the tactic on. Because I already recognize the pattern, I just have to make the men on the board stand in that pattern. I'll show you what I mean. Come to some puzzle videos, watch the puzzle videos, I'll show you how to solve puzzles, and then you can go to chess.com, Lead Chess, any type of tactical chess book. I recommend do tactics. 99% of your game is won through tactical play. If you cannot put tactics on your opponent, you really can't win a game. You have to wait until he actually just gives you something. I don't want to play chess like that. He may never give me anything. The better you get at chess, the fewer things your opponent's going to give you. That's right, that's beginners giving stuff away. You might hear me make some comments about beginners and intermediate. There's certain things that beginner chess players do that makes them beginners, and things that intermediate chess players do that makes them what? Intermediate players. Better than beginners. And the advanced players do certain things that make them even better than the beginner and the intermediate player. If you want to get out of being a beginner chess player, losing a bunch of games, losing every game you play, are you tired of getting checkmated and don't know why? Come back to the Coach's Corner. I'm going to help you get out of that. Okay? Leave me a comment. Ask questions. I'm going to have plenty of videos. More videos are to come. I'm getting the materials together. I'm going to show you how to solve puzzles, tactical puzzles, end-game puzzles. I'm going to show you how to get checkmate. I'm going to show you how to win a game of chess. But yeah, that's where I'm going to show you the moves. Most of the time, I tell you what to think. Here on the puzzles, I'm actually going to show you pattern recognition, tempo, pattern recognition, huge. I repeat, pattern recognition. You'll see when I describe the puzzles how pattern recognition comes into play. Remember to constantly check your checks. Let's do the knight first. Check. Well, we're not going to look for the capture, and we're not going to look for the block. When the king is all by himself, one of the main ways he gets out of check, if he cannot capture, he's going to move. And here the king can move here as well as here. Of course, he cannot come this way. He's blocked by the rook and the opposing king. So this is not checkmate because the king can get out of check. Remember guys, checkmate is a check that the king cannot escape, either by capture, a block, or a move. Remember your threes of chess. Okay, let's look at the other check with the knight. Check. The knight is actually blocking his teammate. The king can actually escape from the side of the board. And really, once he does that, it's really hard to start checkmating the king when he has free territory to run around and get away from you. Once the king is trapped on the side of the board, when the king is on the edge of the board, you make sure he stays there until you figure out the checkmate. You ask, well, how do I keep him there? How do I make him stay there? Very simple. This rook on the 7th rank, is preventing the black king from leaving the 8th rank. He can't do it. He'll put himself in check. No matter what square he tries to go to on the 7th rank, he'll be in check unless he's actually capturing the rook. But let's say he's trying to get away. He can't get away. He's trapped. Okay, so we did the 2 checks with the knight. Now we're going to look at the 2 checks with the rook. Okay, the first check is here. Check. The king can simply escape here. Recognition, guys. Gotta recognize the squares where your men can move to and where they can't. Okay, let's put the king back, the rook back. One last check. Of course, I saved the best for last. Checkmate. You say, oh, well, the king can take the rook. No, he can't. The king cannot capture the rook. Why? Who's protecting it? The opposing king. That's that opposition. The opposition is also, it's not just a space where the king can't go. It also protects other pieces on his side. That's right, the king is protecting the rook, so he cannot capture it. He can't move here because the knight is stopping his escape that way. The knight is stopping his escape that way. And of course, the rook is stopping his escape that way. The king is under attack. He's in check. And he cannot get out of check. This is checkmate. I know I went through a long explanation, but I'm really trying to get you to understand exactly how to find checkmate while you're playing the game. Let's give it a break for a second and do a few more king checkmates with the rook and the knight. Checkmate with the rook and the knight. All right, back to another checkmate in one move puzzle. Okay, now this is the type of puzzle I really like. It's like, okay, is there really only one answer? After all, which white piece can actually attack the black king? Looking at this board, I can only see one white piece that can attack the king in one move. It's not this guy. He can move this way, that is not check. He can move this way, his own man stops the eventual check on the other side of the board. But of course, even though he can't check the king, he still has a job to do. Now, let's look at the knight. The knight attacks the king from one square and one square only. Yes, this is an obvious answer. Check. The king is in check. There is another black pawn on the board that cannot capture the knight. You cannot block a knight. The knight is not it does not attack in a line. It attacks a square. So you can't block a knight. There's no block for the knight. You either have to capture the knight or you have to move out of the attack. And unfortunately, this king can't move. These squares are blocked by the rook. I told you he had a job to do. Yeah, he does have a job to do. And that's what happens on a lot of checkmates. Here's the check. Here's the mate. What's a mate, guys? A mate is a helper. Here's the helper here. This is not checkmate without the mate. It's check, mate. I want you to start thinking of checkmate in 2 parts. Check with a helper. Check with a mate. Check, attack the king. Mate, help stop the king from getting away. Alright, I'm trying to describe checkmate to you. You have to understand what checkmate is in order to put it on your opponent. Some people don't understand what checkmate is. Okay, let's look at some more. By the time you look at a lot of checkmates, you're going to start to understand. If you don't understand, Keep watching. Keep watching. Let's do another one. Let's put the king here. Pawn here. Knight here. We're still looking at knight and rook. Look at that. The knight and the rook. Is the king involved in this one? No, the king is just sitting over here. He's not involved. Once again, look at the pieces on the board. This is practically a giveaway. Some checkmates are simple. Yes, they are. They should be. There are a few that are simple. Checkmate is a position on the board. Now, looking at these two white pieces, which one can check the king? There's only one white piece that can even attack the king. Which one is it? Is it the knight or the rook? I hope you said rook. I hope you said rook. Look at the knight. The knight moves here, here. If you don't know how your knight moves, you need some practice. You should be very familiar with how it moves. And just because it moves here, it does not check that king. Sitting near the king does not check the king. That knight has to be on a square that is check, and he can't do it from here. He can't do it from here. Okay? He's on a dark square. Means he's going to land on a white square. And a white square, when the knight is on a white square, he won't be attacking the king because he is also on a white square. When the knight moves, he will only be attacking dark squares. No white squares. So it's impossible for this knight to checkmate or even check the king. Please understand that. Now let's look at the rook. Just like the rook, in most positions, the rook has 2 checks on the king. He has 2 checks here. Of course, you know which one we're going to look at first. We're going to look at the bad check first. That's one everybody sees. It's so easy to see. But who's protecting that rook? What white piece is the knight is not protecting that rook. The king can capture it, and he should capture it. He should not move away from that rook to get out of check. He should capture it. Remember, the main way to get out of check is what? That's right, capture first. Now, there's one other check with the rook. Rook moves that way. Rook moves this way. Check. Checkmate. Check. With the mate here, the knight is helping. The king cannot escape. The king cannot escape. His own man is actually helping too, because the king cannot go to that square. All these squares are under attack by the white pieces. This is checkmate with a rook and a knight. Little help from a black pawn. Checkmate with the rook and a knight. Let's take a look at another checkmate. We're going to go through these a little faster now. We have 3 elements on the board now. 3 elements. A knight, a pawn, and a rook. Now, same formula. Who can check the king? Who could check the king? The rook has 1 check on the king. The knight, let's see, the knight has 1 check. 2 checks on the king. Well, since the rook only has 1 check on the king, let's start with him. Might be easy to figure out. We might win this game real fast. Check! The rook is attacking the king. Of course, we cannot capture the king. It's too far away. The king cannot reach that rook. It's not a queen. He cannot capture that rook. Nor can he block. There's no black piece. What we will do here, the king can escape right there. There's no white piece stopping the king from going to that square or this square. The king can move out of check by the rook. So, well, the rook is doing a job. What is the rook doing? The rook is connected to the pawn. They are connected. Okay? So, the king cannot take the pawn as long as it's protected by the rook. So let's look at the checks by the knight. Check. I like that check. So, once again, it's the knight. The only way for the king to get out of check or the black side to get out of check by the knight is to capture the knight, which they cannot do. There is no piece that can capture the knight. Or move. The king has to move to a safe square. Let's see. Can the king move here? No, he can't. The pawn. That's right. The pawn is doing his job. The king cannot move into check. Nor can he move this way. Same reason. Same reason. The pawn is preventing the king from moving to that square. Well, let the king get away this way. Uh-oh. King can't get away that way either. The knight is attacking that square. So the king cannot move to that square. And who's got this square covered? Who's got this square covered? The rook. The king cannot move to a square that is under attack by white. That would be check. So the king is under attack. He's in check by the knight. He's in check by the knight. We cannot capture the knight. Black cannot block, of course. It's a knight. Nor can the black king move to a safe square. This is checkmate. Congratulations. This is checkmate. Alright. We'll look at a few more. Once you do enough checkmates, when you do enough checkmate puzzles, these exercises will help you to win chess games. Let's see, the knight, and this one is here. The king comes into action because the king is necessary to win a game. Yes, he is. Well, let's take a look again. We got the rook. We have the knight. And we have the king. We have three pieces. They're all doing something to help get checkmate here. Let's identify the pieces that can check the king. It looks like the rook can check the king by capturing the pawn. The knight can attack the king. He can't do it here. The king is in his way, but he can do it here. So there's one good check by the rook and one, well, we won't call it good unless it's checkmate, huh? Which one would you like to look at first? The obvious one, check with the rook. I think check with the rook is very obvious. That's right. Capture the pawn. Check. That king definitely, you know what? The king is forced to capture the rook if he can legally. Since there is no white piece protecting the rook, yes, he gets captured. That's the difference between a piece that gets captured and a piece that doesn't get captured by the king. No protection for the rook. Therefore, he gets captured. Okay, let's put him back. Put the rook back. We see that is not checkmate. We have one other check. Guess what? Checkmate. That's right. You say, oh no, the pawn. How can that happen? Okay, we're starting to use tactics. That's right. Your game of chess needs tactics in order to win. Right here, the tactic is a pin. The pawn cannot take the knight. There is no capture, because if he did, the rook would put the king in check. And that breaks a rule in chess. You cannot put your own king in check. So we say that the knight, or the pawn, is pinned. The pawn is pinned to the king. He cannot take the knight. And being a knight, you cannot block a knight. So the question is, can the king move to a safe square? Well, I told you the king was doing his job. The opposing king, we call it what? Opposition of kings, is blocking the escape of the black king. The black king cannot get out of the corner. He's under attack by the knight. The clever rook is preventing the capture of the knight. All the men are working together. They're all doing something. The rook is pinning, the knight is checking, and the king is blocking the escape of the black king. All these elements working together have created checkmate. That's how it's done in chess. Let's take a look at a couple more. We've been looking at what happens so far when the king is on the side of the board or in the corner. Of course, part of that means he's trapped by the board itself. Being on the edge of the board, the king just can't leave the board. If he's in trouble, he can't just jump off the board and then come back in someplace else where it's safe. No, he can't do that. So, here we go again. The knight, the rook, the king. Everybody has a job to do. How many checks? Looks like the knight can check here. The knight can check here. Okay, let's look at the other checks with the rook. Where does the rook check? It's a rook. It moves this way. Check. The rook also moves this way. Check. Did you see the checkmate in those examples real quick? How fast do you calculate checkmate? Let's start with the knight. Check. Usually it's easy to see when the king can move. Even though that's our last choice in escaping check, right now we're just trying to figure out, can the king get out of my check? Here's another check with the knight, and the same square is safe for the king to move to. So the knight cannot checkmate the king. The knight cannot checkmate the king. The other checks with the knight, let's say here, that's not check. Nope, no checks here. Check. This is not check. Once again, the knight is not attacking the king from this square. This is not check with the knight. Don't get it mixed up. Nor is this. Standing next to the king does not attack the king. Alright, don't get it confused. Here, the pattern. Look at the pattern. Now, check with the rook. 2 checks with the rook. Let's just start with this one. Number 1. Can the king, the pawn, nobody can capture the rook. The knight is protecting the rook. They're working together. Teamwork, guys. Teamwork. There is no square. You cannot block the attack of the rook. That's number 2. And the king, he can't get away. He can't go here because of the knight. The knight is blocking that square. Can't go here because of who? The king. The king is doing his job. Blocking the king's escape. Same reason here. He can't capture the knight for the same reason. His man is blocking here, and here is check. This is checkmate. This is checkmate. Rook D6 is checkmate. Very good, very good. We just have a few more to look at. We're going to put the rook here. We're going to put the knight here, the king here. It's amazing how just changing a couple of elements on the board changes the whole result. Using the same pieces, the king, the knight, the rook, we're looking for the checkmate pattern. Same question every time. Who can check the king? Who can check the king? The knight can check the king, and the rook can check the king. The rook checks the king here and here. Very simple to see. Where the knight checks. Knight check here. Knight check here. Which one would you like to start with? Since they each have 2 checks, I usually start with the fewest checks. I start with the piece with the fewest checks because I can eliminate it quickly. And the other side, the flip side of that is, if that one check from that one piece is checkmate, well, I also found the checkmate real quick too. But if a piece has multiple checks, it takes a little extra time just for the fact that you have more checks to look at. The queen often has very many checks. There's no queen here, so let's start with the rook. Check. Cannot capture the rook. The knight is protecting the rook. Cannot block the rook's attack. There is no square to put a black piece. Move. There is out of check. There is out of check. Therefore, it is not checkmate. No checkmate here. Okay, so let's look at the other check with the rook. We're not going to go back and forth. Once you start checking with one piece, do all the checks with that piece. Of course, we're doing these checks in our head. We're not actually moving them on the board. You can't do that when you play a game. You have to look at these moves in your head and figure out how the king gets out of check. I hope I didn't have to mention that. So let's now look at the other check. Check. Uh-oh, nobody's protecting that rook there. So the very first thing to look for, capture. Can that piece be captured? Yes, it can be captured. And the king gets out of check. Here, the rook cannot checkmate the king. Both of his checks are unaffected by the king. He gets out of them. So maybe it's check with the knight. Let's go this way. I like this check because this not only checks the king, it protects my rook. The knight is doing 2 things here. Look for where your knight does the most. It's attacking the king. It's protecting his own piece. Check. We cannot, there is no black piece to capture the knight. Once again, it's a knight. You can't block a knight. So there is no capture, there is no block. Can the king move to a safe square? Not if our king is doing his job. Can't get away here because of the king. Can't get away here because of the king. Can't go here because of the rook. The rook. The rook. His own pawn blocks the only square where he could possibly escape. Therefore, this is checkmate. This position is checkmate. The king is under attack. Once again, the king is under attack. That is check. And the mate, who's helping? The rook is helping. The rook is helping by blocking his escape. The king is helping by blocking his escape. When the king is under attack and he can't get away, that is, ta-da! That's right, checkmate. Checkmate. Very good. I have one more puzzle on this page to look at. I like the elements that they bring into this game. all these things can possibly happen while you're playing a game of chess. You need to know about them. This checkmate not only has one of my favorite elements, my favorite tactic in chess, which is discovery. We'll talk about that in a second, discovery. But it also involves an additional element of chess. An element known as double check. That's right, double check. That is a tactic as well. Double check. That's right. How do we double check the king? What does that mean? That means two pieces are attacking the king on one move. Because of the placement of the queen, we clearly see that even though we may have a discovery by moving the knight, we move the knight, and the rook discovers a check on the king. Well, that's all good, but it doesn't last very long if the queen takes the rook. Now the check is gone. So, once again, when you're doing a discovery, when you're moving a piece so that the piece behind it actually does something, it's very important where you put this man. This is what makes the difference. Where do you put this guy? Yeah. You see, because if you just put it here, well, you're not really attacking the queen. The queen's going to take the rook, and they get out of check. Okay? What did I say? Double check. When the knight goes here, well, now the king is in check twice. Taking the rook does not get the king out of check by the knight. That's right. The king is still in check. We didn't get out of check, did we? Well, let's take the knight. Uh-oh. The discovery says that the king is in check by the rook. That's double check. Check by the rook as well as check by the knight. Now, here's the interesting thing about double check. When you have double check, blocking does not work. The king is still in check. Capturing does not work because the king is still in check by another piece. Blocking doesn't work. Capturing doesn't work. Guess what? The only way to get out of check when there is double check is to move the king. So let's see if we can move the king. Obviously, staying in the H file is poison. The rook has the H file completely covered. He can't stay there. And there's our king doing his job. Opposition, not allowing the black king to move to the G file because the white king has those squares blocked. Get used to that. The king is useful. Activate your king at the end of your chess game. He is very useful. The king is extremely useful at the end of your chess game. Absolutely. Okay, there we go. Another checkmate. So let's look at some more checkmates. Mate and ones. I'm going to start adding more pieces to the board. You're going to have to look at more elements. The only thing to add to the checkmate puzzles is the fact that tactics, the pins that are used, the forks that are used, the double checks, the discoveries, all these tactics are what you need to win a game of chess. We're going to talk about the tactics on another video. I'm still looking at checkmate in one move here. We're going to look at some more checkmate in one move videos. So come on, let's go to the next step. Harder checkmate videos. Keep watching.